The bandwidth for this episode of the AR-15 podcast is sponsored by the Firearms Radio Network. Firearmsradio.tv.
Welcome to episode number 82 of the AR-15 podcast. I'm your host, Reed Snyder, and with me today is my co-host, J.W. Rand. This is the podcast about your favorite black rifle. This show is for you whether you're building your first AR or you've been building ARs for years. There is something we can all do to take our black rifle to the next level. Well, J.W., it's been a while. I understand you've had some major life changes.
Yep.
Are you settling down?
We're still kind of getting things out of boxes here, but all the guns are in the new house. The reloading equipment is in the garage. It's still packed up, but we got the powder and primers ready to go. And I started a new job, and in the midst of it, I actually made it over to Ohio for a shoot house class that EAG Tactical put on, and it was a blast. You gotta make your way out to something like that.
You know, there's a facility out in Waco. I think it's called Tiger Valley. And the fellow down there does a lot of law enforcement and military training. And he has the whole shoot house. He does tactical shotgun course and some pistol classes and carbine classes. I think I might go down there and take one of those as soon as I can find enough ammo to kit me out for one of his classes.
Yeah, the thing about it was, I mean, if you've ever seen the Shoot House DVD that Pat puts out, it's really about problem solving more than it is about shooting. And so getting your feet to follow what the rest of your body wants to do that was kind of my first step. Figuring out how you're going to go through a door. You'd think it'd be pretty easy, but you can really overthink things once you throw on all your kit and start getting excited about going into a room. So yeah, it was 4 days, ran late into the night. It was actually a real small class because it was overflow from a previous one that had been just filled to capacity. So we got a ton of runs in. We got between 20 and 25 runs in over the course of the 4 days. And yeah, it was great. Most of the guys were SWAT cops from different departments in Ohio, but there were a couple other shooters, ex-military. There's a photographer from Firearms Media that just got some awesome shots, and yeah, we had a great time. Stuck around a little bit for Steve Fisher's low light vehicle class, and flew my drone a little bit for him. And yeah, that was awesome. It was eye-opening. They did a little ballistics demo, showing shooting into cars, from the car, out of the car, where you could actually take some pretty reasonable cover behind a car. The A pillar right next to the windshield and the side window, whatever you call it, is a lot stronger than I expected.
That's pretty interesting. Well, the question I want to know is, now that you've had all the shoot house experience, do you kit up in the house and try to, slice the pie and going into the master bedroom and freak your wife out or anything? Or
well, I haven't made any runs yet in this first in this new house. I still got plenty of obstacles to stumble over. So maybe once everything gets put away and unboxed, we'll have to come up with a clearing plan.
Well, before we go much further, let's take a minute to thank Brownells and let all of you listeners know that it is Brownells who helps make this show possible. So don't forget that Brownells is there for you anytime you make a mistake. Like when Jake shoots a takedown pin detent across his avocado green linoleum flooring and it skids under the cabinets. You see, that's the problem Jake has. He's not moving to a new house. Avocado green linoleum. Yuck. Anyway, so we are in our hiatus period on the build. We're waiting for our barrel to get back from the gunsmith. And so I want to once again remind all of you guys that you can go to the show notes to AR15podcast.com. link at /075 to listen to or see the show notes from the episode where we talked about our build. And you can go to AR-15podcast.com /giveaways to get details on how to get an entry into the contest and what all the rules are and the best ways to maximize the number of entries that you can get to win the Brownells sponsored AR-15 that we are building for one of you lucky listeners. Just remember, if you want to shop for AR-15 parts at Brownells, you can go to AR-15podcast.com /parts for an awesome way to shop for AR-15 parts and help us continue to provide you with the highest quality podcast that we can.
Yep, the hosting fees for all this data are one thing, but all the money that goes into our salaries, it's a steep bill.
Yeah, I'm up to $0.
Wow, that's pretty close to about what I'm making too.
And it's really upsetting to me because I am the senior guy, and you and Anthony get paid the exact same that I do. I want to know where the parity is. Anyway.
I think, yeah. So what do we have here for a tip of the week?
Well, here's the thing. I was going across the details of the build, probably for the 5th time, just kind of getting down into the details of the different components, and I came across a piece of information that was really, really very helpful. Now let me tell you what it is. Apparently, the ARMS rear sight that we have requires a front sight post that is 0.04 inches taller than a standard post in an F-marked front sight base. And since I had this problem with another orientation of a front sight base, I knew exactly where to get that post off the Bushnell or Bushmaster website. They sell that very post because you have the same problem if you're going to run a front sight post that is not marked with an F and you have a flat top upper receiver. So the requirement for that number 40 sight from ARMS is to have a little taller front sight post, or else you're going to be a little off on your aiming.
Yeah,
so,
I think you'd be shooting right over the top of the target or something.
Yeah, and so the point I am trying to make about reading the directions is this. Sometimes there are really obscure pieces of helpful information buried in all of that text. And if you don't take the time to read it, you're going to miss something important. Had I not done what I do, which is continue to read and bone up and understand the things that I'm dealing with, I would have missed this. And I guarantee you that the listener who received that AR would be writing into me telling me how awful those iron sights are, and by God, what am I telling people to learn how to shoot with irons? So I thought I would stress this to you guys, the listeners. It really does pay to make sure that you know the ins and outs of whatever you're going to put on a rifle, every single part of it. And, I don't think that you're going to ever get pushback from the major manufacturers that we tend to talk about. They always seem to have really high and favorable marks on customer service and quality control. And so if you have a question, call somebody. I have sat on the phone with owners of companies, the sons and daughters involved in the companies, the sons and daughters of the owners, and they'll talk to you. They'll pick up the phone and answer your questions and take you through something and make sure you understand it. So I just want to let you know that that is important. And as much as the internet has to share, sometimes it's best to rely on what the manufacturer says and get it straight from the horse's mouth. So.
Yeah, the last time I remember running into something like that was with the Surefire pistol light, one of those X300 Ultras, and I had been running it and using my kind of off thumb to flip the switch down or flip it on up or whatever, and never realized that you can just kind of push forward for momentary. I had no idea the switch did that, and one day I just decided to flip open the instruction manual, and it was like, hey, look at that.
That answers one of my big problems.
Yep.
So there you go, guys. I know that we all approach this very seriously, and I don't want to make light of it, but there are quite a few times that we will gloss over the obvious things simply because we're either eager to get out there and try something out, or we're just taking.
American men don't read the instruction.
So there you go. Well, JW, what do you think about this week's topic here?
Well, we're going to go over KeyMod, and it's something that you see more and more here as the platforms kind of developed over the last couple years. I know I definitely saw quite a few KeyMod systems running through the shoot house a couple weeks ago, and while I don't have any myself, I was a little tempted to add something similar to the armory.
What would you have to configure or reconfigure to do that?
You don't have to reconfigure anything if you just buy a nice complete upper from BCM, like I was looking at doing.
That is a good point. That is a very good point. But what are you going to do about a lower? It always makes sense to just keep it clean and get yourself a new lower while you're at it.
Oh, there you go. There you go. So yeah, we're talking about KeyMod. KeyMod is a replacement kind of to the traditional quad rail Picatinny. What else is it called? 1913.
Standard 1913.
Yeah, so that cheese grater, nasty on your hands, tear it up unless you use a handguard sort of a system.
Yeah.
Viltor, or Vieltor, how do you pronounce that?
It is Roman for Ultor.
Ah, so it's not a V, it's a Roman UV thing.
But I think the people behind the booth at Voltor just called it Voltor.
Okay, got it. So yeah, they came out with this system. Kind of looks like a retail store shelving unit, laid out lengthwise on a rail,
Right.
and it's an alternative to the, some would say, bulky Picatinny rail. This was a collaboration with the guys at Noveski, and it was the first sort of thing that's gained traction of that sort that I've seen, other than, I guess, like the MOE rail.
Yeah.
And what you see on it is like a circle with an oval attached to it. So it's like a notch with a big hole on the end.
Or a keyhole.
Or a keyhole, there you go. And they're running all the way down the rail, and so it lets you drop something into the slot, slide it, maybe a half-inch or so, and lock it into place. And the system itself is completely open source. They've released it and allowed manufacturers to adopt the system in their accessories, in their own rails. It's not like you have to buy a rail from one particular manufacturer. And yeah, it's really, really taken traction. What do you know about the history of KeyMod there?
Here's one of the things that I thought was really interesting. When they created the design, one of the chief things they were trying to do is figure out how to make it repeatable. And so the design as implemented is able to orient the rail in the exact same spot in every keyhole on any part of the rail time and time again. So essentially, repeatability was one of their big, I guess, driving forces, because that system, the keyhole system, allows it to auto-center inside that hole. So, I think that was a really, really kind of innovative thing here, because, up to this point, really what it is it's couple of screw holes and you attach a piece of that standard rail, the Picatinny rail, or it's a handguard that is nothing but rails up and down the length of it. And so at no place is there a thought for eliminating all of that bulk. And even when you go to like that Midwest Industries, handguard that I put on that race gun I built, that handguard has a 1.5 inch diameter circumference going down the length of the barrel, but they've taken all the rail sections off. And so the KeyMod system seems to be able to eliminate all of that bulk of all of those extra unused linear inches of rail space on any handguard and free it up and replace it with something that gets you complete modularity. And other than the rifle in its grosser form, I don't know how more modular you could ever get with any part of the AR than that.
Yeah, and it gives you the ability to, if you wanted to strap an entire length of rail onto it, you could do that. If you want to put a light directly onto it, you could just strap it straight onto the rail. The cool thing about it is exactly like you're saying, it's completely modular. And so if you want something to be moved, go ahead and do it. You're not stuck with just one chunk of rail out front or just one on the top rather than on the sides. If you want it to be smooth, it lets you move that rail around anywhere you want it.
Yeah, and then to further beat on that, if you only need 5 inches of rail, you put on 5 inches of rail. If you need 3 inches or 2 inches, that's what you do. If you don't want any rail, and like you said, you just want some attachment on there, put the attachment on there. You're eliminating an enormous piece of the bulk of any handguard. You look at the old drop-in quad rails. I mean, imagining all of that extra bulk and just the rail surface on 3 sides, that's enormous. That's probably fully a third of the weight.
And if you're not using that rail, you're probably going to get some rubberized rail ladder that adds even more volume to it.
Yeah. And weight.
Yep.
What is that? Ounces equals pounds, and pounds equals pain.
Yes, sir.
Well, so let's kind of focus on some of the key features and benefits here.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned yet the aspect that I imagine was pretty strong in the development, in that the hardware to actually install these onto the rail is captured in the installation piece itself. So this rail, unlike an MOE or something like that, you don't have to remove it from your gun or get your fingers all wedged up in between your barrel and the rail to install an accessory. It's all captured inside the unit, and you just slap it down onto the rail, torque it up, and it's good to go. It's not something that you're going to have to disassemble your rifle to move your flashlight around.
So you're reflecting like I was on having to wedge your finger in that small space, holding the back of a nut up against the rail while you're trying to find a hole through another hole with a screw and a screwdriver all at one moment.
And then you realize you've fit it in there backwards. And or you dropped it. Yep.
Or it went skidding across Jake's linoleum flooring. So I like that whole piece. That the nut and the screw are captured inside the actual piece itself. To me, that is really the best part of the whole thing. There's also a component of the design that creates a lug, and it fits in the widest part of the keyhole, so that when the rail piece or the attachment fits inside the rails and it gets lined up, that lug secures it from being backed out because of recoil impulse or walking around a corner and jamming your flashlight into the door jamb, or any number of things that happen because we're, guys, and most of us are ham-fisted, and we use our gear very aggressively. So, to have put in the kind of thought and been able to not only come up with the requirement, but to fill an answer to the need, I think that really kind of secures the design and its ability to fulfill every part of what they want it to do.
Yep.
And then I guess the next piece, the angle, the oval part of the key slot. I mean, that's where your KeyMod nuts are going to slide into. That's where those beveled edges are going to allow that component item to line up on the center of the key hole. And that drop-in installation with that minimum of alignment trouble, I think, is really an excellent feature. Because once again, going back to that whole idea that I'm going to thread a screw through my attachment into a nut that I'm wedging into the back of the item with a finger or whatever I can get back there. I mean, that's just a whole lot of trouble. And I guarantee you that you can drop in any piece of kit with gloves on, and I doubt you would be able to do that with 90% of the alternative mounting systems available right now.
Yep. Other than a QD latch of some sort on a Picatinny rail.
Well, yeah. I mean, but obviously the objective here is to give you the ability to have Picatinny when and where you need it, but only there. I think we touched on it. The system eliminates that abundance of unused rail. And, I think when you do that, you also allow yourself lower profiles. The Midwest Industries rail I have, and, of course, now that I'm really beginning to have an appreciation for the KeyMod, I'm realizing I may have picked the wrong rail. But I looked at that MI rail at 1.5 inches of diameter, and it's that thin because it has no quad rail. There is not, 3 o'clock, there's not a 9 o'clock or a 6 o'clock rail on the whole thing. And
yeah, that was the same thing I experienced. I was using a buddy Paul's rifle, just kind of messing around with it in the parking lot, and I think he had either a 13 or a 15-inch BCM KMR, and if you like running your hand out more towards the muzzle, it was a dream just to wrap your hand around, real smooth, super lightweight, and just that tighter diameter of the rail just feels like you can kind of get your whole body really wrapped around it.
Absolutely. And if you needed to mount some gear on it, my guess is, based on everything that I've seen, you can mount it every place but where you need to have your hands and digits in play to work the rifle. Which, I mean, how much better can it get?
Yep. And you're not feeding fingers in through the gaps in quad rail and all sorts of little spots. You kind of got to find comfy spots for your hands with a normal one.
Let's see. I think one of the things that really, you can't deny the value of this at all, and that is that in the adoption of a universal system, you're allowing for cross-product compatibility. I'm pretty confident that most pieces of rail would not necessarily fit into most other manufacturers' pieces of rail because you've got two holes that have been milled into a piece of rail that have to have a screw go through and find another screw hole that's properly placed. I mean, you're just going to seldom ever find that. And I think that's why you find a rail manufacturer that sells their rails with those screws that mount on their rail system. But with this, I mean, I can buy anybody's rail and anybody else's handguard and anybody else's, light mount, and they'll all fit in the same KeyMod system. They'll all fit on that same handguard. And so I can pick what I like. I can pick the design that appeals to me best. I can pick the feature or the function that makes the most sense for what I'm using it for. And I don't have to worry that my Bravo Company handguard isn't going to work with my Noveske barricade block.
Right, you're not stuck in a certain proprietary sandbox. The fact that it's open source and it's been shared with everybody, any manufacturer can pick up that standard and develop for it. So it's not like one manufacturer has the reins over it.
And I think that really kind of helps in the side of innovation, because more than just the cross-product compatibility of all of the big players, a total unknown can walk through the door and say, I have figured out how to build a better mousetrap, and here's the product. And the thing is it'll fit on everybody else's handguard. He doesn't have to worry about, oh, well, now I have to create a handguard, and now I have to manufacture it and sell it in large enough quantities so people will buy my better mousetrap. No. He walks in and he says, I'm a one-trick pony. Here's my doohickey. It's going to fit on your rail, and you're going to love it.
And if it's only made for Picatinny, you're not stuck if you choose KeyMod, because you can throw a chunk of Picatinny onto the side of your KeyMod and mount it right up. It might not be as low profile as a solution that's manufactured especially for the KeyMod platform, but it's not like you're stuck in any way.
Absolutely. So I think that is really kind of one of the biggest strengths of the whole platform. Here's something that I hadn't really thought, but I have to admit that JW has me going down the path of keen interest in an SBR, and so the low profile of the KeyMod system within the interior diameter of your handguard really does make it easier to have a suppressor on an SBR that recedes into your handguard, because you don't have anything that's going to rise up within that space and block your suppressor or get in its way or eliminate valuable rail space because it's there, because now you can't mount something in that spot. So I think that is a pretty good point to make as well.
Yeah, one of the manufacturers that swung by that vehicle class and a little bit of our shoot house was from Psionics Weapon Systems, and he explained to us that they had a contract with a police department that wanted to suppress their rifles, but for whatever reason they felt that the public didn't like the look of a big can hanging off the end of their guns, and so they requested Psionics to build them some SBRs with overhanging rails so that it was only maybe 2 or 3 inches of suppressor hanging out the front of the gun. So maybe it just looks like a flash hider or something like that.
Or it's a bull barrel.
There you go. Extra accuracy so that they can put those rounds exactly where they want and not into the innocent public. So yeah, I mean, there's guys that want to have a real low profile suppressor that they can fit in under the rail, and the fact that those locking nuts aren't hanging way down and brushing up against the barrel gives you a little extra room.
I think the last point that can be made here kind of goes back to an associated point to that product compatibility. It's the whole fact that in the standardization of processes within the TDP or the technical design package, isn't that the engineering term, technical design package, or is it technical data package? There's nothing unique about it that you would have to go and get custom tool and dies made. They're all standard angles, standard things, and so someone put enough thought into it to make the open source component of it even easier because now you're not putting that extra burden, that extra hurdle to get into the arena by making him get, some kind of a custom tool to make an angle. And so that once again decreases manufacturing costs, and it opens the door even wider to the innovators. And
I've got to imagine that there's fewer tool manipulations that need to happen to make a KeyMod rail than a full-on quad rail
right. Well, and
to
especially
carve out all that Picatinny.
right, absolutely.
And just the volume of aluminum that you're using.
I have to wonder at this point. I mean, obviously there are a number of manufacturers we'll get into, but I have to wonder at this point. We've gone years. What? 2002. When did the really kind of the first quad rails come in? It was within a couple of years of being in the Middle East that they really began to go wild and crazy with what they could do on the military side of things. And I don't want to,
Yeah, I mean, I was probably in elementary school or something. So.
Yeah, I wasn't. In any case, I think what I'm trying to get at is I wonder if when the guys at Noveske and Voltor and all of the other companies are looking to design a handguard, do they step away from what was the old quad rails, the old handguards in their original form factors and say, well, now that I've been cut loose on the requirements, how would I reimagine the handguard? I don't know how much of the old inspires what's new, but I have to believe that at some point, if there is a way to diverge from what has gone before and make it even better, someone's going to figure out how to do that. But I kind of think that they're still kind of stuck with the old idea of the handguards and the rails. Because I think we'll see in many of these instances that top rail doesn't disappear. But
Right.
We'll see. I think at some point someone's going to really kind of come in and say, what do we need to do to reimagine the whole? Instead of, how do I just make this work with what I know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so with that, I think we've kind of covered on a bunch of the key starting points to get us into a discussion of who's out there making the things that use the KeyMod system. And so...
In short, almost everybody.
Yeah. There isn't much in the way of that space that isn't filled by the names that you all know and trust. So, of course, we have Noveske and Ultor. Noveske's NSR line was kind of the flagship starting point for them after adoption of KeyMod. And the Ultor CAS-V KM, that was their starting point. And I think both of them are outstanding rails. You're not talking schlock components here. These are industry leaders, and they're trying to put out as high quality piece of gear as they can. Do you have any exposure to any of these guys, JW?
I don't. I really have not run into any of those systems.
I had a chance to look at Ultor's gear at SHOT Show.
Mm-hmm.
Noveske, I've not had the pleasure of looking at their equipment, but certainly that CAS-V, the KeyMod handguard of theirs, I mean, it's really nice. I think it comes in a pretty wide selection of variants, and so the system itself is eligible for installation on M14s and FALs, as well as the AR platform. So it's a pretty interesting deal. I think it's true with these two guys that when they make gear, they make gear at a price point that lets you know that they put a lot of quality and a lot of thought and energy into it, and so they're going to expect you to, basically pay for the good work they've done. So I don't know that you're going to get into that space and be cost conscious.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree. Some of the bigger names, they were pioneering the system, and they demand a pretty hefty price. The Cas V in particular is kind of interesting. It reminds me of like a Mark 12 rail system. It actually bolts onto your upper receiver. So rather than using the existing rail, it goes over the top of that and then extends that monolithically across the barrel.
Right.
And it's a little bit bigger. It's got 45-degree KeyMod and everything. It almost gives the gun a look of like the volume of a Scar as far as the front rail is concerned. A little bit bigger. So yeah, I mean that's their take on it, and that's one of the first ones that came out.
Yeah, and here's the thing: they were also trying to meet the expectation of the military purchaser. You and I as consumers are not typically concerned about whether we can mount an M203 grenade launcher underneath. So we don't typically look for a handguard that's M203 barrel mounting compatible, but certainly I don't think that there's ever a problem with saying that, look, if I'm going to spend my dollars, I'm going to buy the best gear I can, and if it just happens to be that that's what the Army or the Marine Corps or any of the units under the Special Operations Command, if that's where they got the idea and they're going to sell it to us, I'm willing to buy it from that manufacturer because I know someone put a little extra thought into it. I'm pretty sure that the guys that are selling that cheap airsoft stuff out of Singapore and Hong Kong don't really put a whole lot of thought and effort into what it is they sell, which is why you can usually buy most any of it for $35 a shot. So one of the other early adopters that really I think is someone that I have a great deal of respect for is Mega Arms. And of course we've seen their MTS or Megalithic Tactical System, but also their MKM, which is their KeyMod rail. Both of them are designed with the KeyMod in mind. So as far as the adoption of the KeyMod system, these guys came in almost at the very beginning along with Ultor Noveski, although I don't believe they had anything to do with the design side of it. And so Mega Arms makes some really amazing equipment, and they've adopted this. So I think that if you're going to look at someone that's trying to be as forward-thinking, who has been able to hitch their wagon to something that has taken off like it has, you got to give them kudos for making that choice so early. Let's see, Knights Armament is another company that I have a number of their systems. I have a quad rail for my 20-inch barreled AR, and I have some of their rail sections and some backup irons from them. And I'm suitably impressed with all of those pieces. And they make it's a URX4, which is once again another KeyMod handguard. And I think a lot of Knights Armament gear is designed with the military procurement system in mind.
Yeah, certainly.
These guys are looking for military buyers to come in, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, and implement their systems on the rifles. And I believe it was the Marine Corps has an A4 that has their handguard on it. So, of course, having a love for the core, that's why I chose to make my 20-inch AR one that had the Knight's Armament handguard on it. But very good.
The cool thing about the URX4 is that the rail body itself acts as the barrel nut as well. It's all one piece.
I think when it comes down to it, they've done a really good job over there at Knight's Armament putting these components together. And I would say that of all of the accessories manufacturers, Knight's Armament seems to have the widest variety of useful attachments as well.
And I think anything that you pick up that has their logo on it, it's going to be fairly bomb-proof.
Well, I would hope so. Don't they make suppressors too?
I know they make the SR25, the SAS. I assume it comes with their own can on it. I don't think anybody else makes that. I think it comes straight from them. But I'm sure I could be chastised in the comments.
I wonder if their own suppressors fit under their own handrails. You would think they have to.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've always kind of seen them as being a little on the higher end, so they weren't in my consideration when I started collecting stamps.
Well, let's see. I think that in the middle ground of high quality, but a little more affordable, I think you're going to find some of our next guys, and they make some really good quality stuff. Midwest Industries makes the Gen 2 SS free floating handguard, which is the one that I got. They now make a version with KeyMod in it, which of course makes me rethink the value of my original purchase. I need to, I think, maybe go back and get a new Midwest Industries handguard. But
yeah, it looks like it's a super slim 1.5" OD, and they've really cut away a bunch of material there on the 45 degrees.
Absolutely.
So it looks like a great lightweight, low profile, but still, I mean, they've even drilled holes underneath the Picatinny to lose material there.
And here's the problem I have with the KeyMod from any of the manufacturers where they don't use that 45-degree space.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I want to put offset irons. And when I look at the irons that Knight's Armament has, and I'm sure at some point someone's going to come up with different irons, maybe even Magpul irons. They can fit in the off space. But even if you have to put two pieces of 2-inch rail at the 45-degree angle and mount a couple of irons, I think you're still getting to the same place you need, which is an offset option without something dangling off your top rail.
Yep.
I'm really disappointed that I'm not seeing more at that 45-degree angle.
Yeah, I think there's a balance to strike between low profile, small OD versus usability on those 45 degrees.
Yeah, and you know what? It may be a very simple and straightforward design dilemma that they're facing. So I don't want to go out there and start, being Mr. Critical. But, I would like to use that 45-degree space for something.
We are sitting here behind microphones, so what do you expect?
Yeah, I don't want people to think that we're going to take excessive liberties with that. But, but there are other manufacturers in the same space that we're talking about that do have KeyMod at virtually every angle around the perimeter or the circumference of the handguard. So that's not to say that you can't find what you want.
For example, the next one here on the list is the BCM KMR.
Yes.
And this is the one that I've got a little bit of experience with. It is super low profile, but it also uses those 45-degree spots.
See, I think that that's absolute maximization right there.
Yep. So I'm looking at their 15-inch, which is pretty long for a handguard, and it's less than 6 ounces. They've blended aluminum and magnesium. I'm sure they have a crazy name for that. Magnesium or something silly.
Wow, and that's even smaller inner diameter than the
Right. You're going to have issues if you really want to squeeze a suppressor underneath there. But yeah, if you're letting everything hang out the front, it's a great option. Real low profile, super lightweight, and it lets you do everything at a 45 if you want to.
Well, I have always been real happy with Bravo Company and everything that I've gotten from them, and every interaction I've had with them has left me absolutely satisfied. So, I just went over to the Silencer Co. website, and the Saker that I'm getting, it won't fit inside their handguard.
Humble brag.
Oh, well,
First world problems.
from the guy that has the SBR and the wall of guns. No, I'm gonna throw that out there just because I'm feeling a little inadequate every time that JW gets on the show. That's all right. That's all right.
You don't want to see what we were playing with out at the range on Sunday. One of my buddies is a manufacturer, and he just put together a Modus full auto. Yep.
Yeah, but I've already shot one of those.
Well, it's still nice to take pictures with at the range.
How about a saw? Have you ever fired a saw?
Never shot a saw.
A 60?
Nope.
A Mark 19?
Mark 19? No.
Well, I'm sorry. Now I'm just bragging.
There you go. And you didn't even have to pay to feed them, did you?
No, I didn't.
Just in years of your life. Just those little things.
Yeah. Well, I had the advantage of being a driver for the commanding officer of the School of Infantry back in the 80s. And First Sergeant was a rather laid-back Marine, in as much as that he wasn't always yelling at you. Mostly he was just shooting the shit, telling you stories about the Quezon Valley, and we still had old-timers back then who had actually been in Vietnam. They were working on 30 years, so by the time I got there, they were close to retirement, but they'd all been seasoned veterans. But we'd go out to the ranges. He'd let me shoot everything that there was. I think the only thing that I never did was fire a tow missile or drop a mortar shell, and that's probably because he didn't want me to lose any digits or miss the tank with that tow missile.
Yeah, I've got a buddy who just went through some training. They got to fire the javelin a couple times.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I want to say it's about $80,000 every time you pull that trigger.
I don't know. There's been a lot of inflation. We were playing with stuff in the 80s when we thought that we were going to fight Russians, so we needed to really bone up on our gear. And plus, they were paying a lot of stuff to the, defense. What do they call it? The military defense industry complex. I don't know. I'm all for it anyway. So let's go on back
to KeyMod. What else we got here? We got some primary weapons rails. We got the DI KeyMod handguard.
Yeah.
Is there anything kind of unusual about this one? Looks like a nice lightweight system, bunch of cutouts.
I think
there's actually UD attachments on it, which is nice.
Right. I think what it comes down to on the PWS is that they're a quality manufacturer. That once again, I would raise them, into that air, closer to the Noveski, Mega Arms, Knights Armament space. They've done a really good job with their products, and the stuff that I've seen from them has been very impressive. I mean, obviously, you and I were out there talking to them we had them on as guests of the show, and so I was very happy to talk to them about some of the things that they had in place. But I don't
Yeah,
think
for sure.
KeyMod was really a focus of what we were doing.
Now, on their website, they show that there's QD attachments at the front and back of the handguard, and they show kind of the sling swivel attachments clicked in on the front and the back. Now I see another photo that just has, like, it has those removed, and at the back there's a hole, but at the front all it has is the KeyMod slots. Is KeyMod like compatible with QD attachment points? Can you just click one right into a QD slot?
Well, here's the thing. That circular part of the key is the exact same diameter of all of the QD holes.
See, that's one of those things that I would have had to read the manual.
Right. And, once again, it's that forward-thinking idea of maximizing what you're doing. If you make the hole the exact same size as every QD hole, what you've done is doubled the effectiveness of that hole. Because now
That's fantastic, yeah.
And it's QD.
Yep.
I think when it comes to the accessories, PWS does have one of the accessories that I think is really a very useful accessory for a KeyMod system, and that's basically the bipod mount. They've got that sling stud on a piece of QD, or not QD, a piece of KeyMod furniture that basically allows you to mount your Harris bipod or any of the other quality bipods right onto the bottom of your KeyMod rail.
Yep.
So you've just eliminated that profile of having a piece of Picatinny rail, then having a sling stud rail mount or accessory that mounts on the rail, and then attaching your Harris bipod. Now you're going straight to the rail.
The reason you're using a bipod is to stabilize your shot, and the more widgets you put between your gun and that bipod, the less stable it's probably going to be.
Absolutely. I don't think there's any denying that. CMMG is another company that has really kind of become a wide-ranging adopter of the KeyMod system. And I think when you look at their jump into the market, they have always, to me, felt like the provider that is going to be as close to quality as they can get, but without jumping into the frills that are unnecessary. Yeah, and I think that is a good place to be for most consumers. I don't find for me that I have a need for some of the bells and whistles that are on the products that are out there. And, I still have most of my barrels are, phosphate coated. Most of my barrels are, chrome lined. And it's not to say that I don't have the other things, but I'm oftentimes a value conscious purchaser, not a cost conscious, but a value conscious. And so sometimes I don't need the higher end coating or the higher end this or the higher end that. And I think CMMG does the good quality, the good support, and they try to be in that space where they're going to give you a good price for what they're giving you. So they're not taking you to the cleaners. And they have, from my understanding, quite a few pieces of rail furniture to help you out when you're getting ready to go into that arena.
Yeah, the last one here you've got on the list is Geisley.
And
I haven't spec'd anything out from them. I know they look really cool, but I would imagine that they're pretty high up there on the price. Where do those ones tend to fall?
Geisley does end up being higher on that price point, but I think the biggest reason that they are is, once again, that focus on extreme quality. I don't think that anybody who uses a Geisley trigger can deny the fact that they are extraordinarily well made, that they're made with the highest, attention to the components and the manufacturing, and all of the major factors that are going to influence you to buy one of their triggers. I think they put the same level of consideration into their rails. When you look at their KeyMod rail system, this rail mounting hardware is the same hardware that was on the AR-15 podcast's first AR giveaway, and it looks like a barrel nut that's maybe twice as long as your standard barrel nut.
Mm-hmm.
And the rail basically slips over that entire assembly, and that
And
creates...
from what I've seen online, it's a very snug fit.
Oh yeah, and it's an enormously supported mounting position. I remember a handguard that basically mounted to the lip, the spoked lip of a standard barrel nut, and literally each screw went through one of the indexing cuts, just like you would slide your gas tube through. And so basically it was just a very, very light grip on that lip. And frankly, I can't imagine that with an enormous amount of torque that you aren't going to at some point experience a failure, or at least a handguard that isn't going to stay true to the rest of the platform's orientation.
Right.
And this...
So where some of the other KeyMod offerings kind of prioritize lightweight, low profile attributes, if you're looking for something a little heavier duty like the Geisley offers, you're going to get rigidity. So if you've got like a laser mounted out front, if you're sitting on a bipod, you might be kind of torquing your rail versus your barrel. That laser is going to keep pointing true because there's that much more engineering that goes on inside that barrel nut.
I think that is a very, very succinct way of putting it. And I would say that really, when it comes down to it, that's what you're getting when Bill Geisley does something. It's that degree of attention to the engineering on it. And I don't know the backgrounds of a lot of the other guys that are in this space, but I think you're right. I think everybody's trying to pick that balancing point between a number of factors, and Geisley has picked this place of rigidity, durability, and quality. And the fact of the matter is that you're going to have to pay for that. But it's like all things. The guy that's going to sell...
It's the backbone of your rifle, though. I mean, it's supporting all those other widgets that you're strapping on.
The guy that's going to sell you a brand new $5,000 Porsche isn't selling you a Porsche, or he isn't selling you something that you're going to be able to own because it's hot. So when it comes down to what our list of fine manufacturers have done, I think you have a pretty wide pretty wide spectrum of good quality manufacturers across the board, and at any number of price points, from very reasonable to might just make it hurt a little bit to get into it. And so I know that there are a ton of other people in that space, but when it comes down to it, you only have so many hours in the day, and so we could be here all night trying to illustrate every one, or we can just kind of leave it at a reasonable representative sample.
Yep.
So I think there you have it.
Yeah, those are all the rail systems that that we've kind of been looking into recently. Obviously, there's tons of other things out there. We'd love to hear what you've run, what you've got your hands on, how they compare. If there's any particular small little innovations that guys have squeezed into those rail systems that we just haven't heard about, we'd love to take a look. Kind of getting into the accessories here. I don't really want to belabor every single little accessory. We've been going on for a little bit here. Obviously, anything that you are going to strap on a Picatinny, it's going to work because you can put Picatinny right onto your KeyMod rail. But if you want something a little lower profile that's going to be a nice tight fit with your brand new rail, these manufacturers have really taken this spec and run with it. You're going to see, like you said with PWS, you're going to see the bipod mount. Everybody, it seems like, is doing either a vertical grip or a hand stop, something a little lower profile to index your front hand off of.
Now, on that vertical grip, I've actually seen a skeletonized one that just came out, and I couldn't tell you who made it, but I'm sure that it's anybody that looks even reasonably hard enough is going to find it. But it is absolutely skeletonized. It's probably the lightest vertical grip out there.
Yeah, I mean you're going to see handguard panels, obviously. I mean there isn't really a sharp surface to rub against, but you could change the color of your gun with some customized handguard panels, or just kind of give you a little more grip if your hands are getting wet or whatever. One of the things that I hear a lot about is the light mounts, and whether they are adapted towards the kind of 90-degree sections or whether it's something that bolts right into a 45-degree offset section of KeyMod. You see the Thorntail from the Haley guys. There's a bunch of different light mounts that get your light real tight into the gun so it's not hanging off, it's not getting in your field of view. And the KeyMod, because it's stepped so tightly, you can put it exactly where you want, whether it's to get it right where your thumb or whatever finger you're going to activate it with, right where it can access it nice and quickly. We mentioned earlier that Knights actually make some backup irons that bolt directly into that KeyMod. So while it would give you a little bit of a shorter sight radius, versus doing something that hangs off of your upper receiver at the rear and then the front of your rail at the front. I mean, what are you using those 45-degree offsets for? You're using them to pop things up close.
Right.
So shorter sight radius, maybe that's a good thing.
Well, and here's my interjection. Being a lefty, everything on the market is made to hang off the right side. But with KeyMod, it doesn't matter. It's the same hole whether it's on the left side of your handguard or the right side. And
Hear you.
See, I mean, for me, that's a go-to point there.
Yep. You mentioned the QD sling mounts. Now that's kind of a built-in feature then.
Yeah, it is a built-in feature, but at the same time, I'm seeing rail pieces with a QD mount on top and an actual KeyMod QD. All it is QD. That just kind of. So I don't I don't really know why they would put a QD on top of a little QD, but hey, somebody's got to make money somewhere, right?
Yep. Sling hooks, obviously an alternative to the QD. Barricade stops. What's your experience with that?
I have not had any experience with the utility of a barricade stop.
I think that's about where I sit too. Haven't really felt the need to jam my rifle up against something.
Not yet, but I think if you're talking about like the training that you did with a shoot house and urban environments, there's definitely some use for it.
Yeah, I think I'd need to put barricade stops all the way around my rail though, because you never really know what side of your gun you're going to be stopping against a barricade. So I don't know. I think I'll just use my hands.
I'm pretty sure the makers would be happy with you buying 3 or 4 of their barricade stops.
Yeah, put that. I'll strap them right behind my second and third backup light and laser.
There you go.
And the last one on the list is a belt hook. Explain this to me.
Well, it appears to me as if it's designed so that when you're using your single point sling and you've got your rifle dangling out in front of you, you can kind of drop that hook into a piece of unused MOLLE webbing or maybe your belt. Certainly my reservation is what happens if I have to bring that rifle to bear really quick, and I'm trying to figure out how to disengage it from my belt.
Yeah.
I don't want to
I
play.
was seeing it as kind of like a holster system that you just kind of mount your whole rifle on your hip or something like that for when you're open carrying into Chipotle. But I think it's a little lower profile than that. You probably have to use it in conjunction with a sling.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that if you're going to reach into the salsa station, you don't want your rifle swinging against the bar there, making a whole bunch of racket.
Yep.
Plus, who wants salsa and jalapenos all over their AR, right? Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up. I don't want the listeners to think that there aren't people who don't like the mod rail system. There are some detractors, and obviously everybody's experience is different. I think in my experience with anything related to the mechanical, ARs being one of them, from time to time we overlook our own inability to follow directions and things happen, but other times it really is the product itself, and so the truth is always somewhere in the middle. But some people have...
If there's something on your gun that you don't want to move, Loctite tends to be your friend.
Right.
I can imagine some of these moving pieces kind of walking their way out under recoil. So, yeah, just watch those things.
Another thing is really when it comes down to it, the kind of the angle on those KeyMod holes, I think it kind of turns that thing into a cheese grater. So if you're one of those tenderfoot operators with soft hands and tan that you get under the light of your fluorescent lights at the office, you might want to reconsider what you're holding on to. So gloves or filling up all your KeyMod holes with something is probably a good idea. But
yeah, those panel kits that BCM puts out are pretty nifty. Pat was running what I think was a beta version of the updated rail panels, and they're pretty sweet. Very, very low profile.
Well, as soon as we get a chance, we'll take a look at those as well. So, JW, I think that's a pretty good summary of a very broad and deep topic. Certainly we invite the listeners to write in, tell us their experience, let us know if there's a company that they're fond of we didn't mention, or if they have nothing but horrible things to say about someone we did mention. Just let us know what your experience is. We'd love to kind of share it with the rest of the guys and see what's what.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, with that, what do you think, JW? You want to tackle some feedback?
Let's do it.
All right. So Bob is a contributor to the show, and he has written in with some pretty detailed technical explanations before, and so I want to read this for you. He says, reading Anthony on last week's show, a question was asked about the difference between salt bath nitriding and chrome lining. He says, chrome lining applies a thin layer to the surface of the barrel. The barrel and the rifling would be cut larger depending on the thickness of the coating. He says the salt bath penetrates into the steel, actually changing the surface of the base metal. Both nitrogen and carbon are interstitial atoms in the crystal structure of the steel, while elements like chromium, nickel, and molybdenum replace iron atoms in the crystal matrix. Smaller elements like carbon and nitrogen sit between the iron atoms. So he says at higher temperatures and high concentrations, these interstitial atoms will penetrate into the steel. When they talk about a case depth or thickness, in this case, it is the depth of the nitriding that penetrates into the steel. See, I really like being able to use those words. And so Bob, of course, always gives us the very high-end technical view of something, but it is to me absolutely interesting. So He goes on and says, by shoving all these interstitial atoms inside the crystal structure, you greatly reduce the ability for the larger atoms to move around each other. Think of those beaded seat covers. If you have two and you pull one across the other, it is bumpy, but they will slide. Now, take some marbles and shove them into the smaller spaces in between the beads. Now, when you pull them across each other, it takes more effort. This is a simplified way to think of how adding these interstitial atoms hardens the steel. There is, of course, a lot more going on here with intermetallic carbide and nitride formation, but I think that helps get the idea across. Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, I haven't heard language like that since I took my materials class back in college. Crystal structure was a daily occurrence. So what he's talking about here is kind of adding material or actually getting material down inside the metal itself. And so he says the advantage I see is that the nitriding does not change the dimensions of the barrel and cannot flake off because it's actually part of the barrel. Will the average shooter know the difference? I don't know. I went with a stainless barrel for my build. And so, I mean, obviously there's a difference there. All these different coatings are done differently for different reasons. But there's definitely something to be said about making a barrel to spec, going through some sort of process to harden it, and having it come out exactly the same way, rather than having to cut it a little bit bigger, put a coating on that is eventually going to wear away. And so yeah, I mean, it's just things are made different ways, and it's great to have perspectives like this to explain it to us.
Well, and I think that, I don't know, I think of myself as a techno geek, and so I really do enjoy getting into the nitty-gritty of this kind of detail. Of course, I'm sure if I had a...
You mean intermetallic carbide and nitride formation?
Uh-huh, absolutely. I'm sure if I had a podcast that was just me talking about all these things, we would have far fewer than our 3 ordinary listeners. So,
so yeah, thanks, Bob. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And Bob does go in and tell us about a build that he's putting together. He sent a picture, which I couldn't get to come up. That's just a failing of me and my understanding of the Google Docs. And so don't condemn me because I was born before remote controls. But
he goes through the parts. He says that he had an aim point on it, but upon Mr. Snyder's advice, he decided to learn to shoot irons first. So he pulled that off for some more range time with the irons. Lists all his parts. It's kind of a menagerie of different manufacturers, but it sounds like a great little package. He says he's got about 300 rounds through it. There was only one failure to eject. He says it happened when the gun was real hot and one of those steel Tula cases stuck in the chamber on him. So yeah, we got a little bit of feedback there on the website about shooting steel. So obviously some mixed reviews depending on what sort of steel you're running. I do it all the time and haven't really had any issues. But obviously depending on what sort of coating is on that casing, running your gun hot, bunch of rounds, leaving a round chambered while it's hot, there could be some issues.
So let's move on to Arturo. So he says, "Hi Reed, how's the weather in Texas today?" Well, Arturo, it's hot. It's always hot in Texas. In the middle of summer, it's hot. It's really darn hot. So ask me again, I'll tell you the same thing tomorrow. It's hot. Anyway, he says, listening to episode number 81, just heard you mention your use of the Ford Assist. He has an idea for a topic for a podcast is proper methods to recover from malfunctions. For example, today I don't think that using the Ford Assist when the bolt fails to go into battery would be recommended, for example. Do you really want to jam around in chamber if the gun failed to load around normally? It could cause further trouble depending on the cause for the malfunction in the first place. But they still have them on there, and as far as I know, no Marines have lost any fingers, digits, or eyes because of them. So if there are any and you know of one such incident, let me know, but I'm just
Yeah, I
saying.
think that the concept, it isn't like when your bolt is all the way to the rear, like you got a double feed or something like that. It's when you've only got a little bit further for that bolt to go home. And it's
Exactly.
because your gun's all gummed up, whether it's full of sand or whatever. You've been shooting it for a while. It's nasty. The locking lugs are getting a little gummed up, and you just gotta seat it home. So
Well, and I will tell you that the cam pin, as that bolt starts sliding back, that cam pin will turn the bolt. It will turn the bolt, and that thing will come free because there's just enough force to make it happen. Now, it may not go all the way back and catch and strip the next round, but it will come loose. So he says, regarding Anthony's problems with steel case ammo, he could try a lighter weight buffer and or switch to a low mass bolt carrier. However, I think his problem may be the gas port on his barrel may be too small for the steel cased ammo he's using. He has tried using different vendors. Has he tried using different vendors loads of steel case ammo? I don't know. I sent that on to Anthony, so we'll see if he responds to you, Arturo. Anthony may not. He may be trying to find the cost-conscious approach to whatever ammo he can feed his rifle. In any case, Arturo, thank you for writing in, and we always look forward to hearing from you. He's been giving me a lot of grief about the mailing list, so yeah, it's all in good fun, I hope. I hope he doesn't try to track down Jake and poke him in the eye for that. Anyway, so next we have Rob. He says, aloha. I know shooting eye dominance is not just for ARs, but eye dominance will affect AR shooting. Have you or any of the great GGR shows covered this? You know, I don't know if we've run through the test. Are you familiar with the test for or for eye dominance, JW?
as far as like sticking your hand out and putting your thumb over something and then closing each eye.
Yeah. Okay, so you do know. In any case, you know, Rob, I think you bring up a good point. A back to basics AR show about safety, handling, you know, stance, you know, kind of looking at it from the perspective of, you know, now that we have an AR. That's a good point. What do you think, JW? I think
Yeah, definitely. I mean, his eye dominance issue, sometimes you'll see guys pick up a rifle and on a hunting rifle or maybe a shotgun, they're shooting it righty, but they're using their left eye. Sometimes you can do that because there's a little more clearance over the buttstock. You can kind of get your head cocked over, and it works for some guys. But with an AR, where everything's real close to the barrel, to the line of bore, there's really not much room to get your head cocked all the way over that buttstock. So you kind of got to shoot the same eye as you pull the trigger with. At least that's kind of been my experience with newer shooters that are trying to figure out which eye works better for them. But yeah, things like that, things like handling the gun safely. It's you've never been shooting long enough to forget about those things or to not go over those again.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we'd be happy to throw another show together like that.
We'll put that in the lineup. Now, Dr. D.
Yeah, he says, here's a couple links worth reading that pertain specifically to topics you've covered recently. Talks about a MSR failing episode. I guess that was the last one that you guys did.
Right.
And he talks about kind of the myth about DI gas systems making the M4 an unreliable platform. He's got a YouTube video there about the SCAR and talks about the truth about barrel length regarding muzzle velocity and accuracy. If this is the same one that I've read that goes into like 308 precision. Mm-hmm. Is that what it is?
Yeah, and they keep cutting the barrel down.
Yeah, that was a really interesting piece.
And it was very counterintuitive.
Yeah, I mean, I shoot a shorter 308 bolt gun. I want to say it's only 20 inches or so, one of those 700 AAC SDs.
Right.
At that sniper course, we were shooting out to almost 1100. And, I mean, as long as you know your drops, it's still getting there. I was using hand loads that are flying a little slower than some of the other stuff just because that's what I found was coming out accurate. And, I mean, as long as you know what your drops are,
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with flying a little bit slower.
Here's the thing with that article. I think it was a great article, and I think that what they came up with was some very informative discussions about what conventional wisdom has always had to say on the topic.
Hmm.
But I suspect that if you were going to go outside of the very narrow parameters with which they did the test, let's say if you're going to have your long-barreled rifle and you were to tune it and begin to try to really figure out where the barrel harmonics are and tune the rifle to those harmonics, I think you could use that barrel length to get you the precision you wanted, but then you're not talking about off-the-shelf and conventional wisdom. You're talking about something that's highly tuned and engineered. I don't think it's any different from, what do they call it, blueprinting and balancing an engine?
Yeah, same concept. You can
Yeah,
do that with the action of your bolt gun.
exactly. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the conventional wisdom is something that needs to be addressed. But I do think that there are ways to take what you're given and make it better.
Hmm.
It's a good read. It's definitely a good read.
Yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
DefenseReview.com had a long article about the big M4 myth that fouling caused by direct impingement gas systems make the rifle unreliable. Excellent reviews or examination as well. And so I think that of the three articles, that M4 fouling myth is one that I would suggest everybody read because it basically really does delve down into something that I think a lot of people may have wrong. So, Dr. D, as always, you provide outstanding material for us to look at, and I would definitely recommend the MSR, the M4 article.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier that Tim C had posted a a comment right on our website there from Lucky Gunner where they did a brass versus steel cased ammo comparison, and they fired a ton of rounds. And he's
And
go ahead.
we mentioned this in one of our episodes, early episodes. Steve and I, Steve, our FRN law enforcement officer, was on with us, and we had talked about this very study, and they did a great job. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, they took the Federal 55 grain, the Wolf 55 grain steel cased with polymer coating, Tula steel cased with polymer, and then they used the Brown Bear, which was steel cased with lacquer coating, and it also all three of those steel case had bimetal jackets, which are steel and copper, and was it 10,000 rounds through each?
Yes. But the bimetal bullets tore up all three barrels.
Right.
One of them, it tore up to the point that, what was it? One they didn't replace, two they did, and I can't remember what the reasoning was. But basically, the bimetal jackets just tore the barrels up, and I think that it was nominal wear with the Federal stuff using brass bullets. So
Right.
I guess there's nothing like throwing a piece of steel down your barrel to, erode your throat out and wear out your rifling.
Yeah. I mean, that article, it's really fantastic. It's super long, and it's got some really good photos of what guns look like after they've been hammered that hard.
And I think that Tim's point about there being no evidence to back up the claim that the lacquer coatings melt in the chamber and cause extraction failures, that may very well be the case. I don't know whether that is or isn't possible, or is or isn't something that happens. But I do know that when I've had a failure to eject, it typically is with the Eastern European stuff. And I think my contention is that they don't have the quality control standards, and they're probably not loading the loads as hot as they need to load them to cycle stiffer actions or stiffer mechanisms. So, whatever the case is, I know a lot of people are not happy with the steel stuff.
Let's see, last year, who is this? Someone was being sneaky with their identity.
Yes, so I'm going to call him Mr. King. So he writes in Happy 4th of July or Independence Day, or heck with it, Happy Birthday, America. So, on your earlier show, number 78, you mentioned go and no-go gauges. Might I ask you guys what these are, how important they are, and how to use them? So, here's my experience. And JW, you chime in.
Are these the go no goes for like the headspace between
Yes,
your bolt
gauges.
and barrel?
You strip your bolt, and the idea should be that your go gauge will fit in and your bolt will close. Your no-go gauge will fit in, and either your bolt will just barely not close or maybe marginally close. But it's not supposed to be loose. And then there's a third gauge. It's called a field gauge. This gauge means that it's designed to represent a chamber that is completely out of spec, which means that if your bolt closes on it, throw away the barrel. Your bolt should not even come close to closing. So the no-go gauge is basically the Rubicon. If you cross the Rubicon, it's no bueno. So the idea being, these gauges will tell you at a minimum or a maximum spec and a point of failure spec where your chamber is in that spectrum. And most people have a differing opinion on the issue of whether it's necessary to headspace your rifle. I think many people will tell you that any conventionally made barrel with the barrel extension is headspaced at the factory, that any bolt that is made within the specifications required for the rifle will fit that chamber and allow you to safely fire virtually any piece of ammunition on the market today. Other people will tell you you're foolish to do that. You should always have a gunsmith headspace your rifles. I've never headspaced a single one of my rifles. I've had the chambers checked to see what the actual dimension was for purposes of the 223-556 question, but never headspaced. And you know what?
If you were to see something that was in or out of spec that was brand new, to quote unquote headspace them together, what would you actually be altering?
Well,
would you screw the barrel in further? Like what could you?
No, it would mean that the chamber was reamed either too deep or not deep enough. So if your bolt wouldn't close on a go gauge, in theory, you could take it to a gunsmith and he could take a little more material out of the chamber and it should work. Frankly, I'd send my barrel back. If they're going to send me a barrel that's out of spec to the point where I can't even get around to chamber, then they've taken me for a ride. I want my money back.
Yep.
The no-go gauge and the field gauge, obviously the no-go gauge is at point of barely being at the maximum spec, and so if it does or doesn't do its job, I don't know that that's really telling you anything all that much.
Okay.
If you're once again at the point where the no-go gauge will absolutely not come close to closing, your chamber's not deep enough. But if you get to the field gauge and your bolt closes, that means that somebody went way too deep, took way too much material out of there, and at that point your rifle is not serviceable, because the idea is you strip the round off, it goes into your chamber, the bolt closes home, and your bullet is sitting so far forward away from the face of the bolt, your firing pin can't even touch the primer. Well, that's of absolutely no value.
Yep.
So, I think that's what they're for. That's how you use them. Do you need them? I would say no.
How about swapping bolts between guns?
What's that?
How about swapping bolt carriers between uppers?
I don't think that you're going to see enough wear in the average user for it to make a difference. Okay. I think that if you're going to go out and shoot 100 to 200 rounds a week, over time with enough seasoning, you're going to make the two, part of a whole. And
So they'll wear together, and if you were to toss it in and change up the combo,
would you
might
think
run into some issues.
I don't know what that would look like.
Okay.
I think that conceptually, you might not have. Well, I can't even speculate. I don't know what that would look like. I don't know that the problems you would have would necessarily be point of failure problems. I think that there might be some sloppiness, lack of accuracy or consistency in performance, but past that, I don't know. So I think it makes sense that if you're going to build a rifle, keep it together, and let the darn thing age. And when you're done with it and it's time to retire it, or let's say you shoot out a barrel, well, buy a new bolt. I don't think that that's all that much to ask of the rifle, because by the time you've worn out the barrel, how many rounds do you think you'd have to shoot in that, JW, for you to wear out a good quality barrel?
Yeah, exactly.
20,000 rounds, 10,000 to 20,000 rounds?
If you've bought that many rounds, you probably got room in the budget for a bolt.
I would figure so, because that's a whole lot of going to the range and shoot houses. Well, I tell you what, JW, when you wear out your first barrel, tell me.
Okay. So yeah, Mr. King says I'll be buying the Magpul adjustable stock and buffer tube next Thursday. He wanted to stay ahead of the game, so he bought a vise, punches, hammers, and other tools needed, kind of like we mentioned in one of our recent podcasts.
Yep.
Says he's got all but the armorer's wrench. Says he's finally all caught up with your shows and looking forward to the next one. Have a great holiday weekend. And we did. We had a great holiday weekend. At least I did.
I had a good holiday weekend. I didn't have as much fun going around shooting things as you did, apparently.
Well, this holiday weekend was the moving one, so.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Oh, that's right. Didn't you leave your wife in the middle of last week while she was packing boxes so you could go and shoot guns?
No. She was out of town, too, on a work trip. It worked out perfectly.
Well, when the mouse is away, or when the cat's away, the mouse will play.
Yes, sir.
That's all right. Well,
all right, let's wrap up here.
That is our show. Once again, we want to remind you that we are having a contest, so we're going to tell you how to enter. We also want to let you know that we do enjoy hearing from you. We are humbled these days with all of the wonderful feedback that you're leaving us on iTunes. Thank you so much. We appreciate every one of you. We try to do the best we can for every one of you, and sometimes what that means is that when you catch us with our pants around our ankles, you tap us on the shoulder and tell us to pull up our britches, because frankly nobody wants to see me moon them. So in any case, do write in. We appreciate you all. So let me start off here, JW, and I'll get us through the outro. You want to pick it up halfway through then?
Yes, sir.
So enter the AR-15 podcast rifle giveaway sponsored by Brown Elves by going to ar15podcast.com/winner to join the FRN mailing list. You can also enter the giveaway by leaving written feedback on iTunes and Stitcher. That would give you a maximum of 3 ways to enter your name into the drawing, and I do want to stress, written feedback is the key. There are 40-some pieces of feedback where nobody left a written comment, and unfortunately, those individuals will not be entered into the giveaway. Now, of course, several of them were 1-star ratings. They don't like us, so I'm not really all concerned about them. Let's see. You can send us any questions or comments to feedback@ar15podcast.com. You can also send us a recorded voicemail by using the SpeakPipe plugin on the right-hand side of the AR-15 podcast website. And we did verify. It works, and apparently the email comes to me. So, you can also subscribe and listen to the AR-15 podcast for free at firearmsradio.tv/iTunes. Be sure to leave an iTunes review so iTunes can place the show higher in the searches for potential listeners. We only get bigger because we share the wealth, so tell your friends about us. Also, if you listen to us on the Stitcher app, be sure to leave us a review there. JW, take it away.
Remember to share your pictures with us on Flickr at flickr.com/groups/blackrifle. Follow us on Google+, where you can watch us live Monday nights at about 10 o'clock Eastern. It's at firearmsradio.tv/plus. Make sure to check out our YouTube page, where all of our video podcasts are archived, youtube.com/firearmsradio. And follow the network there on Facebook at facebook.com/firearmsradio. Be sure to check out our other podcasts here on the Firearms Radio Network and some of the other resources online. I was just looking at our gear reviews, and I saw somebody did a KeyMod review, gave it 9 stars. So take a look. Remember to use our Brownells affiliate link for all your AR-15 parts at ar15podcast.com/parts. Anything you can't find at Brownells is probably over on Amazon. If you go to firearmsradio.tv, we got banner links, and those will give us just a tiny little smidgen of a cut of your purchase. So we really appreciate you using those affiliate links.
Well, so everybody, that's another podcast. We're going to try to line up another couple of episodes to keep giving you guys good information. We have our chief marketer and grand poobah of marketing things back in the hopper, so we'll get him on the line about getting some interviews and some guys to come in and talk about the things their companies are doing. So hold your horses for that, and everybody have a good week. JW, that means you too, so good night.
Have a good one, guys.
This has been a production of the Firearms Radio Network. You can find more information at firearmsradio.tv.